morning, everybody. Please give a warm welcome to Marina. Thank you very much. Well, we're here. After all those lunchtime sessions we've had in London, and I've been telling you about this great city called Plymouth and all the wonderful people who live here, you can now see for yourself. They're all here. All the wonderful people are here. Marina, very warm welcome to Plymouth U3A. I know you know a little bit about us, I've told you about us and so on, and the sort of people we have. We're all keen to hear your words this morning. I thought we may just have a chat, just between us. I don't know if they'll be listening, but we'll have a little chat for half an hour or so, maybe 40 minutes. And then we've got another microphone, and we'll invite questions from the audience, from our membership, if that's okay with you. Can we just test that the microphone's working all right? Could you just say hello or something?
Good evening. Very, very happy to be here. It's my first time in Plymouth, and it's still difficult to pronounce. I'm very sorry, because you know English is not my language, and I was in a certain age when I need to start speak English, and I feel very privileged to be here. Good morning.
Thank you very much. I thought, Marina, that perhaps we could start. You were born under the communist system, and I think it intrigues us to see, or would intrigue us to hear a few words about your sort of family life and your early school days, what it was like living under the communist system.
I would say I'm a good example of a person who goes through all stage of Russia. Of course, I was not born during Great Revolution, and I don't look like, but I was definitely from a very serious communist period of life of Soviet Union. I mean, I was studied at school with communist propaganda. I was a pioneer. I didn't become Communist Party member, but was very close, because without that you would not achieve any career in your life. And I was a witness of perestroika, of collapsing Soviet Union, and rising era of Putin. But I escaped in 2000, and now I can watch this only from outside. But when I was a child, I believe I lived in the best country in the world. It was exactly what we heard from TV, what we can read from newspaper, and we've been all equivalent poor. I mean, it was just like normal. And we can go to see friends' flat with the same furniture, and we were lucky to wear second-hand clothes from friend of us. I mean, and it was normal. And of course we were happy as any children might be happy. But in 1985, when its perestroika started, and when people started to receive more information, we realized something was wrong. And what is absolutely true, a lack of information, is the biggest crime against human. And what we had. And when we received this news, when it was Soviet Union, it was the best education, it was the best healthcare. It is not completely true. Yes, some people, we had it for free, but it doesn't mean it was the best. Again, we did not have a freedom, we didn't have not freedom of speech, and I'm sure the best people escaped from Soviet Union, even not escaped, they've been pushed. And unfortunately, it still happened for now.
Yes, well, thank you for that. You then went on to university, and for 5 years you studied engineering, but your real love was dancing. That's an interesting combination.
Yes, I think I was born already dancing. But because I liked, and just naturally, I liked studying. I was good at school, And when I complete my 10 years at school, I didn't know what to go because I was good in math, I was good in chemistry, I was good in literature, but it was a difficult decision. But of course I knew I want to dance. But for parents it was not serious choice. And my mom said, you can dance only if you're going to university. I will support you. And all parents in Soviet Union, they tried to make life of their children better than it was their life, because it was very hard. And what I can say now, our parents just survived every time because salary was not very big. You can work very hard, you could be the best, but it doesn't mean you will receive a proper salary at all. And it was every time just enough, not to be hungry or not to have clothes, just enough, not more. But of course it was a social system to support, and educational what we have in university was for free. And when I wasn't sure what to do, and economical it was quite fascinating, oil and gas it was nothing. Everybody said, you have just the best degree, engineer of economy and gas and oil. But then when I completed the study, I was just like, no, okay, it's interesting, but it's not my cup of tea. But it was a very proper, because it was 5 years. We have a 3 years very serious foundation, like a math, chemistry, everything, and then it was specializing. And when I had this choice, or doing a master, what we called in Russia, or PhD, what was obviously serious, because my diploma was about environment, how to save environment, of using very aggressive material during a production of some oil and gas product. I still remember this. But I had my future of dancing, open dance club, being competitive dancers. I now can call it, it was just like internal immigration. Can you believe it? 1979, when I just completed my school and I applied to university. Everything's so boring, everything's so not interesting. And now you have a ballroom dancing with all beautiful dress, with this all competitive events. And maybe one day chance to go to compete to another city. I'm not talking about England, I'm not talking about any other country. And this, of course, was more interesting. And it was kind of interesting event because we met people from Baltic countries, and they've been kind of dissident. Even they've been dancer, but we talk about history of Soviet Union, when these people been sending out from their home countries, staying in Siberia, when they lost their relatives. I didn't know this before, and I knew this through my dancing. When I travel to Siberia, like Omsk, and I see people just don't have enough food compared to Moscow. It was extraordinary educational for me. From one side, it was different, very good-looking life, but it was a chance to see your country from different sides.
Well, I can easily see why you were so interested in dancing. That's a lovely description of what you got from it. On the business of pay and so on, my driver in Moscow used to quite often quote me the old joke that in Russia we pretend to work and they pretend to pay us. And I think there was never a true word from that, I think. Marina, maybe we could just move on now, because you then met up with Alexander. Alexander is her husband's real name, but we use the word Sasha. Sasha is the familiar name for Alexander. So from now onwards, we'll use the word Sasha. You met up with Sasha. Could you tell us how you came to know him?
After I met Sasha, we called him, he was my present for my birthday. It was like that. Because I met him when it was my birthday. He was working on one criminal case against a friend of mine. It was dance couple, And it was 1993, quite difficult time in Russia, and John can prove it, because Soviet Union collapsed. System was very strong, but it was, I can't say chaos, but quite difficult time for new Russia. Criminality was extraordinary. People did not have enough money. And sometimes even officers started to make some criminal things, like a racket. And this friend of mine couple was under this criminal action. And Sasha investigated this. And when it was my birthday, this couple, friend of mine, just afraid to come to see me in my flat. And they decided to do this only because Sasha said, okay, I will go with you. If you're just so frightening, but you want to see your friend, let's go. And when they came to my flat, I see very unusual officer of security service. He was in his 30s, early 30s, but he looked like 18 years old boy. Very handsome, very thin, and very sportive, and very shy, very shy. And then when he reminded me of this meeting, he told me he was just so shy. When I asked him, would you like some strawberry? He was just like, didn't know what to say, what's right thing, what is wrong. It was our first meeting, and I called him after that, you're my birthday present. I didn't know he going to be my future husband. Yet, not. I was just concentrate about my single life, and I was just, okay, nice guy, but maybe not for me. But it's happened.
As it does with many of us, of course, looking back. If I could just move on then to Sasha, because just to explain to our members that Sasha was a member of the KGB, and of course that makes us all feel, But in fact, Sasha belonged to the Department for Anti-Corruption. It's almost like our special branch, or MI5 maybe, not the KGB that we normally think about. And it then became the FSB, but we'll use the word KGB just for simplicity, and we know what we're talking about. But he was a remarkable man because he hated corruption. When corruption was going on all around him, which was quite an interesting position. Could you sort of bring out that part of his character, please, the anti-corruption, his hatred of corruption?
I will tell a little bit more about, to describe Sasha. Sasha was from a very specific family. His grandfather was a military pilot during Second World War. And of course it was all romanticized. And Sasha was very proud to be officer. It was not like, I don't know, he was not patriotic in a bad way. He was just patriot in a good way. He fight for his country, and he believed the right things. And he joined army very early age. He was just 17. And 18, he became a student of military school, and all his life he served. He served for his country. In 1991, when Soviet Union collapsed, he was just introduced by his commander to headquarters, what called Lubyanka, KGB. But it was already not KGB. It means he never joined a department what worked against dissident. He never worked as a spy. He immediately joined this department, high criminal economy, and then it was department, anti-terrorist department, all this kind of stuff. And every time when he did it, he believed he does right things. I received many times question, why he was so smart he joined KGB. Everybody knew KGB was wrong organization. But again, we've been born in this country, and he was officer. And when we're talking about officer and right things, I believe it was all about Sasha. And it was absolutely right things for him to fight against criminal. And I met people who Sasha saved, real saved, because people were all kidnapped. It was some threat of life for these people. And I saw how people were grateful. Because in a period of time, 1991, 1993, when I said it was some kind of perestroika of all systems, system didn't work. And people could have something against them, but they didn't have support. They could come to police, you can come for very serious department, but nobody could start case. I mean, people couldn't receive help. And Sasha was one of them. I can't say just one of them, these people who still work. But when you do right things and suddenly you realize doing something opposite, you try to help people, but another one try to collect money from these people. Or your head officer just tried to collect people from business. And of course for Sasha it was not acceptable. And he became quite difficult person. Why he needed to change for a short period of time a few different departments. He was not sending out because he was a very good specialist. And even more, he was the youngest officer who became 32 years old. He was a colonel in a very high rank. And everybody said he was going to be maybe future the youngest general. But it would be work for right system, what we expected from Russia, what we saw that would be all in a legal way. But of course it didn't happen, because Sasha started to fight against system. And when it was final, his department, very secret, I would say they based even in a secret location, not in a central quarter. And this department was organized specifically to commit crime. You can't believe it when officer would ask or to kidnap a person or to beat somebody. And when it started to be collected, one case, of course they didn't do because it was just an order. And they tried to avoid all this criminality. But when it was finally saying, could you kill a Mr. Berezovsky? Somebody is maybe familiar with this name when Berezovsky became a person presenting here in UK. But then he was a state man. And when you officer of security service received order, just a question, it was not like an order signed, it just, could you kill Mr. Berezovsky? For Sasha was just obvious answer, something wrong. And how it's all his fight against system started in 1997.
Thank you. Yes, we'll come on to Boris Berezovsky a little later, but thank you for bringing him in now, because that's a very important part of Sasha's story, in fact. It was this hatred, this total distaste of what he saw going on around him. And I certainly, when I lived there, in fact, we didn't realize until we met each other that we may have even brushed shoulders in Moscow, because Marina was married in 93 and I was there in 91, 94. So we don't know, of course. But I certainly saw the level of corruption that was going on around in Moscow, and it was horrendous. I mean, we had a car bomb blow up about 100 meters from where we lived. That was a mafia car bomb. So it was called the Wild East. That's what John le Carré called it in his book fairly recently, The Wild East. So Sasha built up this huge knowledge of corruption, and he put it into a portfolio. And he took it to the new head of the FSB, KGB FSB, someone called Vladimir Putin, who, well, Marina, tell us a story about the presentation of this portfolio to Putin that Sasha did.
It's exactly 1998 when name of Putin became wider known in Russia. Because before that he served as a vice-mayor in St. Petersburg when it was Sobchak, mayor of St. Petersburg. And it was just a local name. Then after Sobchak lost his election and Putin was moved to Moscow, again it was a very undercover. Nobody heard about him. And suddenly in 1998 he was appointed as director of FSB. My first question to Sasha, who is this man? Sasha said, I don't know, it's somebody from St. Petersburg, and very strange, because he never worked in a field. Previous director of FSB was maybe not the nice man, but he worked from very beginning to the end, and he was respect for this. But not Putin. And when Sasha was arranged meeting with Mr. Putin, just somebody believed it would be something new in FSB, this new director. Sasha didn't believe to this. And when he brought this portfolio with all connection, criminality, with business, with security service, with traffic of drugs and thereupon, he knew it would be not reaction at all. After that meeting, when Sasha came back home as an end, he said, no, I don't think it will work. But what's your impression? What do you think about this man? He said, I don't know. But his handshake is very weak then. Maybe somebody improved after that, because we knew Putin tried to present his very strong personality. But then Sasha said it was just a very weak handshake. Only things what happened after. Our landline was controlled, and we knew something might happen after that.
Indeed. I think probably Mr. Putin was very worried when he saw Sasha's portfolio. He saw the implication that led directly back to him. And as you say, the landline was interfered with.
Taped, yes.
And, but the next stage was that Sasha really wanted to tell the world, or Russia anyway, what was going on. He was that brave, and he gave this Novosti, was it Novosti? Interfax, I beg your pardon, interview, where he rather bravely decided his colleagues wanted to mask up. He chose not to. He was a very brave man. And the message got out, but it also got through to Putin that he must do something about it. And so, well, the next stage, Marina, was that some trumped-up charges were made against Sasha. Would you like to take the story on from there?
This press conference happened in November 1998. And 25th of March 1999, Sasha was arrested. And when I saw first-time prosecutor and asking, why do you need to arrest him? He is not a killer. He is not a dangerous person. He said he shouldn't go to TV. He shouldn't say this what he said. He shouldn't go for this press conference. He just told me openly. I said, but he didn't commit this crime, what you accused him. He said, it doesn't matter. We will open every case he worked on, and we will finally put him to prison. He openly told me this. He didn't was just ashamed. And we had a search in our flat, like 5 hours searching. Again, why? Why you need? They tried to find any documents, any paper, any notice Sasha might have. But Sasha was smart enough. He knew it might happen, and he took all his archive out from our flat. And everything what they could collect, it's my tape and my recording for my dance classes. And when they took it all, I said, how am I going to work? What am I going to do? Because you just collected all my recording. Because they tried to find anything against Sasha. But he was put in the most strict prison in Moscow, is Lefortovo. It was for political prisoner, for very high-profile criminal, and he spent 9 months being in this prison.
Indeed, and then, but he was released by the judge on the first occasion, and then immediately arrested on another trumped-up charge.
It's another example of what we went through. Everything what happened in Russia now, in 2018 and 2019, we already had this before. And Sasha tried to show, please, be serious. What might happen in Russia? It would be very, very bad story. But then, in 1999 and in 2000, people still be in euphoria. They believed it never be able to turn back. It's never be able to close everything what was opened already. And of course, when Sasha was first released, but never be able to go free from this courtroom because he was rearrested, I think it was almost last year when a military court was independent. Because now when we're talking about justice system in Russia, it's not free at all. It's not a legal system. It's a telephone system. If you want to take any judgment, you have a time, but it's not for decision. It's for take a telephone call and just asking what is right to do. You know, and every time when judge decide person is innocent, it may be changed immediately. But then when it happened to Sasha, a military court was very fair, and they said it was nothing wrong, and everything he was accused, again, it was wrong. Say, you are free man, and he was immediately arrested and sent to another prison. It's called Butyrka. When I heard this name, I was shocked, because Lefortovo was terrible, but it was so systematic and controlled. But what I heard about Butyrka is just like a nightmare, because this prison has 100 years history. It seems nothing changed then. I mean, quality of staying here, you might be killed, you might be poisoned, might happen anything. And I was very, very worried about his life. And I remember he said, when first time he has a meeting with prosecutors, and they said, if you're not going to cooperate with us, we will poison you. Because when you have a parcel from your relatives, and you have some sausages, you might have, again, everything is very strict. And you never know, it may be poisoned. And they said, we will just poison to you. We will not allow your wife to see you if you will not cooperate. And we will going to meet your wife in your block of flats. And this time Sasha said, good luck. If you meet Marina, I know she will do with you. You know, he was very confident. In this case, he was very confident. But of course, very much worried. But it's very strange, but Butyrka, Sasha said after, was much easy place to stay than Lubyanka. In Lubyanka, psychologically, it was so much pressure. But in Butyrka, Sasha wrote one book called Gang of Lubyanka. It's only in Russian. It's an incredible book. It's described all this system, all this security service. But I couldn't read after I finished this chapter when he said, when it was my birthday in Butyrka, and my cellmates made a birthday cake for me. I was sleeping, and suddenly it was started to be noise, and actually it's not allowed. It's some kind of policy. If people rest, they rest. Nobody make a noise. And when he woke up, and he said, what happened? And they said, happy birthday. And when he saw this birthday cake made from everything what people received from outside, he said, it was amazing. It was the best birthday cake I ever had. And when I'm going to be 50, he wrote, when I'm going to be 50, I will ask to make the same birthday cake. But unfortunately, he never became 50.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, of course, I think the message became very clear to him then that his life was really in danger and that he really needed to leave Russia. And he then devised the plan to do just that. But he didn't tell you what he was doing. He asked you to go and see. Would you take out the story?
Sasha, from one side, looked very open person and very easy to talk, but he was very professional and something he didn't share. And I only received he going to travel to see his relatives in his hometown. His relatives was in the North Caucasus, not in Moscow. And he just told me, let's go to airport. I said, why we need to go to airport? He said, I'm going to visit my relatives. It was when received news he's traveling. And when he called, not directly me, but a friend of us, and saying, Marina need to buy a new mobile, would be not controlled, and I will communicate you. And he called me saying, Marina, try to buy any tickets to go somewhere. I said, why? Why we need to go somewhere? It was already October, our son started school, I started my work, everything. He said, don't ask, just do it. Again, where we have to go? Any place, where would you like to go? You wanted to go for some nice holiday, just do it. I was really surprised, but I realized it's time not to discuss. And he said, go to Spain. You have a friend of yours, and she based in Malaga. You might see her. It was only why I decided to go to Spain. I didn't tell to our son, he was 6 years old. I did not tell to my mom. I told my mom only a day before, because it was kind of security in case I would be stopped. Just not because I'm trying to escape, just in case something might happen. And Sasha was so nervous, but only things made me feel why he's so nervous. He called me every 15 minutes. Are you in a car? Are you in an airport? Are you in a plane? Are you already took off? You know, it was like that. He was nervous I would be able to get out. But I was just like, okay, when we came to Spain, it was 2 weeks holiday. It was very strange because in a few days he started to tell me, Marina, we probably should get out from Russia. I said, no way. No way. Why? He said, because I'm not in my hometown. I am in Georgia, and I'm waiting for a document, and we just need to go out. I said, no, I can't leave my parents, I can't leave my country, my job, what I'm going to do, where am I going to? He said, it doesn't matter, just out from Russia. When I said no, he said, okay, if you don't like to go, I'm not going to. I'm going back to Russia, I would be arrested, and we don't know what might be next. I still discuss, maybe you would be not arrested, because one court you've been released. I just try to find something, just saying better to stay in Russia, better to stay with my parents. Again, I was not prepared. But when he was almost on the way to airport, just to airport, to fly back to Moscow, but he was asking to go back by Boris Berezovsky, because he tried to explain situation in Russia became much worse, what even we might imagine. And Sasha would be arrested, he would be killed, nobody will support us in this time. And when he explains this to me, I say, okay, I'm taking this decision and we're going out. But where, I didn't know.
No, and of course that was a very difficult decision for you, because it meant either going back to Russia and almost certainly Sasha being perhaps killed in prison, or not going back and maybe never seeing your family again, or your homeland again. So it was a terrible decision. Marina, the time is moving on. I'd quite like to, you eventually finished up in London. It's quite a dramatic story, and I do recommend you read her book, or a book about it, because it's very detailed. But if we could just move on, because you found yourself in London where you sought asylum. I know you wanted to go to New York. Sasha was intended to go to New York, but they wouldn't have him for various reasons, and you finished up in London. How did you find London when you arrived there?
England was my dream destination in one way. Before that, I was thinking to go to England even before, because the best dance festival is here in Blackpool. And when we landed in UK, and Sasha had an extraordinary sense of humor. And he said, Marina, you wanted to go to Blackpool? Now you're here, you're in UK. Even it was all uncertainty. It was so, we didn't know what might happen to us. But he already said, Marina, you must be happy. And I think we were just lucky, because we've been met by a lawyer in London. We spent almost 8 hours in airport. Of course, we need to explain everything. Again, when we just landed, and when Sasha approached first policeman he just met in airport and said, I'm officer of KGB and I'm asking for political asylum. It was just like first step. And after that, we've been just waiting for this next. We didn't know. And we've been allowed to get out from airport. We didn't spend time not in a detention center. It means life in UK was for us immediately from good side, was very welcome. And my first impression was just from my child readings, because I would say, my childhood was very popular Charles Dickens, and we read all his books translated in Russian. And of course, it was a lot of fun at reading Conan Doyle, all about Sherlock Holmes. Again, it's all in kind of education. And it was quite close. We always try to know what happened in UK with history, with modern days. And I just tried to find what I knew and how does it look for me, because I did not speak English and I didn't know how we will communicate. It's the only things what being a little bit difficult to us. And we've been based in a hotel in High Street, Kensington. I would say quite good area immediately to love everything around you. And our first interview was in Holland Park. And again, and meeting our first teacher of English who did not speak Russian, but she loved Russia all her soul. It was another impression of English people. And in 1 month, I just started to realize I'm just so too much happy. Even like everything is good. Everybody, thank you, please, excuse me. I was just like, oh my God. And then Sasha, again, with his sense of humor, told me, Marina, we are in an island. We are in a kingdom. We are under protection of Queen. It was just like a fairy tale.
That's wonderful. We mentioned Boris Berezovsky earlier because he is quite a key player in this story. As Marina mentioned, that Sasha did actually save Boris Berezovsky's life. In fact, he was rather indebted to him, but of course then he had also found himself seeking asylum in England, having fallen out with Putin. In fact, Berezovsky actually got Putin into that job, and yet he turned against him. So Berezovsky was now in England, and he was, maybe I could use the word benefactor. He was paying Sasha back for the fact that he had saved his life. Could you just say a few words about Boris Berezovsky?
Boris Berezovsky is a very controversial figure, and some people just black and white of him. But he maybe not exactly black and white. People who knew him very well might tell he was an extraordinary person. But he was able to make enemies so powerful, and his most powerful enemy was Putin. Berezovsky believed to Putin, before Putin became president of Russia, he is not corrupted man. And he was so strong to believe this, why he was really surprised when Sasha tried to tell him, no, he's the most corrupted person. He said, he didn't accept yours 100,000 present because he has more bigger present. In this case, it was a big mistake of Berezovsky, of his power. He believed he achieved so much in Russia. I would just try to remind you, election in 1996, when Yeltsin was so low rating, and he was front of to lose to communist Zyuganov. It was a very dramatic election, and only when all these powerful and rich people decide to support Yeltsin, and Berezovsky was one of them, and Yeltsin won this election. Still question tag, was it completely fair or not? But all these rich people decide now they could benefit from what they did. And Berezovsky was absolutely sure he can control media in Russia because he was owner, private channel, newspapers, radio station, everything. But he was very relaxed because to achieve, you need to control. But he thought he now already just benefited. And when it was election of Putin, of presidential election, when Putin made a few steps, just changed what Yeltsin tried to do for freedom of election, for freedom over governors, Berezovsky immediately realized Putin is not a person who they believed might be. And they started to be enemies. And how he became an exile in London. He was a huge critic. He supported Ukrainian Orange Revolution. He tried to build better image of Belarusian last dictator of Europe, Lukashenko, but he lost his case in 2012 against Abramovich, and it was very devastated, not only of losing this money, we even can't imagine what money we're talking about, but his reputation. And when he lost his reputation, it was the most damaging. But what happened to him in 2013? We're still divided. And it was an absolutely open verdict of coroner, because it looked like he committed suicide. But for many people it's not. And it's still open verdict. Was he killed or he committed suicide?
Yes.
It's
yes,
all what
indeed.
happened to Berezovsky.
Our members will remember that Berezovsky was found hanged in his bathroom. The door was locked from the inside, which caused people to say, well, how could it be done by anybody else? But there's still a large core of people who believe that he was assassinated by Putin. But let's move on then, because Sasha built up some business interests, and one of his business partners was a man called Andrei Lugovoy, who now comes into our story, and he came over to London and met up with Sasha at the Millennium Hotel, and of course we know the story about the polonium being put in the tea. I've got a picture of... Oh yes, there's a picture here. Did you meet Lugovoy? There's one occasion I found a picture with you in the picture, but otherwise he wasn't known to you, Marina, was he?
It was first time when I met Lugovoy. Yes. I heard about him before, yes. But this is 60th birthday party of Boris Berezovsky, yes. How we all met.
Yes, indeed, yes. And anyway, we know the story, of course, of the polonium being put in the tea. I wondered if it's not too difficult to talk about, maybe we could just go from the point when Sasha came home from that meeting and then began to feel ill. Could you just take us through the next 3 weeks? I know they're very difficult 3 weeks, but if it's not too difficult.
It was not first meeting to Lugovoy, because it was 2006, after meeting in a birthday party in January 2006. You said they've been not business partner, but they started to develop this relationship in this security report. Because Sasha started to work for private investigation business, and it was a proposal to complete some report on people who try to do business, if you know how does it work. And when he met Lugovoy, Lugovoy had a reputation as a person who used to work for Berezovsky, as a head of his security service. I mean, it was not friendship, but some kind of professional relationship. And you need definitely sources from Russia if you want to complete something serious. You need to have. But Lugovoy in this time was very looking for find connection in UK. He wanted to build business in UK. And this looked like, again, I don't know, was it true now, or was it looked like this business interest. And when Sasha first time met Koftun, this another person, and Lugovoy brought this and introduced him as a very good friend, as a businessman, Sasha started to be very suspicious because he didn't look like a businessman, he was very arrogant, and Sasha told me about this. But okay, he just needed to communicate to Lugovoy, and he needed to provide some information, and he decided to go to this meeting. And when he came back, he didn't show any problem at all. But at midnight, he started to be very ill. He was very sick, and it looked like a food poisoning. And I immediately started to help him, but we didn't call to ambulance because we didn't see it might be important. Only Sasha, again, tried to make a joke, or I don't think it's a bacteria. I said, maybe it's some bacteria. He said, this bacteria has some, like a security service stuff. I said, no way. Who's going to do something against you here in London? It was fight against logical and knowledge of Sasha. Sasha felt immediately something serious wrong because his sickness didn't look like food poisoning. He studied in a military chemical poisoning. For him it was exactly the same. But when we tried to calm him down, when I tried to buy some simple medicine in pharmacy, but it became worse. And after second night, when we called for ambulance, and ambulance came at the night and said, oh, it might be season flu, and better keep him at home, because if you're taking him to hospital, it would be worse, because everybody had flu now. It was our first time experience with ambulance, too. But when we asked for private doctor, a Russian-speaking doctor, and he saw Sasha saying he's not suitable for being home, better to call to ambulance again. But Sasha's condition became worse and worse. And when we called to ambulance and he was taken to ambulance, I was almost feeling safe. I thought, oh, he's in hospital, he's under control, everything would be right. But he was not released after all testing. He was not released in 2 days because they didn't know what happened to him, because they treated him with antibiotics because of this bacteria. But reaction was completely different. And they started to communicate to pharmacy company what might be side effect provided of this. It was another week. It was almost 11 days when Sasha started to develop very strong signs of like chemical therapy. When I visited him in hospital and I just saw a completely different person compared to what I saw just the day before, I was really angry. I was very patient with the staff. I don't need to say we are criticized NHS, but again, it was my first experience and I wasn't sure what's right, what is not right. But again, he was treated in just normal unit. He used the same facilities with other people. I just tried to tell you, after what we released, he was poisoned by radioactive material. In the first stage, he was with other people. I mean, when he was more dangerous. But nobody could understand what happened to him. And only after that, after concilium, when I said, I was just saying very loud, you need to help, you need to describe, you need to explain to me what happened to my husband. And when they brought these few doctors, and one said, he definitely looks like my patient from cancer unit. We need to take him to another unit and we will monitor and we will find. And only then it started to be investigation, because it was taking another blood test and they found heavy metal in his blood. It was only police investigation started in 12 days. And only then Sasha started to be very rapidly changed every day. And the same doctor said, I'm practicing in another hospital, and this hospital is bigger, it's better, and I will take him to this hospital. Again, he was treated in a cancer unit first, but because his conditions became even much worse, but not any explanation, he was moved to another intensive therapy. And this picture was taken exactly in intensive therapy. I was disagree. I didn't like to take this picture, to be honest. When we had this discussion, I said, Sasha, we don't need to do this, because one day when you will be healthy, when you would be out from hospital and see this picture of yourself, you would be just so sad. But he said, no, Marina, you have to do this. And he agreed, because he knew after people will see what happened to him compared just 3 weeks ago. He was absolutely a normal person. It would be the most strongest message for what happened. You can say anything, but when you can see this image, you understand what happened.
Yes, I think he was absolutely right there, because whenever one hears the word Litvinenko, I think the psychotic picture immediately comes to mind. And this is his greatest gift, I think, in a sense, to justice. That's after his death. Marina, thank you very much for that. Just one last word. We've got a few minutes before we hand over for questions. I mean, if I may say so without embarrassing you, the next 9 years, I find them extraordinary in illustrating what a tough, resolute person you are, because you fought the establishment to get justice for your husband. You fought a very determined Theresa May, who didn't want to have an inquiry. You fought a very determined Cameron, who didn't want an inquiry, but you won. Could you just say a few words about the final bit of the story in the inquiry itself, please?
First of all, when it's all happened, I didn't know what to do. I know I need to be cooperative, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to initiate anything. I was not a campaigner. I would say I was a wife. I was just a backside of my husband, and why he could do what he wanted to do, because he knew he's safe in his back. But when he was killed, I received this question, would you like to be like Sasha? I said, no, I can't be like Sasha. Sasha was professional, he was just fighter. No, I can't. But would you like to know who killed your husband? I said, yes, I do like to know who killed my husband. And when you say A, you need to go to and the end, to the Z. And when it all started, I didn't know it takes so long time. But it was very important for me. I was supported with my son. He was 12 when it all happened. Very difficult age. And it was easy for him to accept everything what happened to him. When he was 6 years old, his life changed without even his permission. Then at 12 years old. But for me, it was like a very special indicator. I saw my son, and I know why I'm doing this. And when it was decision to go for inquest in 5 years after police investigation was completed, I would say I was absolutely on the side of this police investigation. They did everything. When they interviewed Sasha in hospital, I saw they've been crying, seeing him like that, because Sasha was every hour losing his energy. It was difficult for him to talk because he was damaged inside completely. But he tried to say everything what he knew. Why this was investigation so successful? Because a victim, it means investigation of death, was evidence provided of dead man. And they said he is one of us, and we will do everything what we can do. And it's still now, because these people who committed this crime, they've been not brought for justice. It means it's not a time. And one day, when these people will be able to bring to justice, they will have justice. But what we could do maximum and to bring a knowledge, I started this talk, is a lack of information is the biggest crime, I believe. And we brought all this information to people. What did happen in London? What happened to my husband? What happened to my family? What might happen to people we never knew? How we know people been damaged of this polonium contamination? I was, and I knew this. It was not damaging in a first term, but it might be quite difficult, or maybe high risk of developed disease. I might be not, but I know this. But how many people don't know why they started to feel unwell or something? And this knowledge was very important to bring this through justice. And when we applied for inquest, I received a very strong resistance from British government. I do understand. I tried to be logical, not emotional. Relationship between Russia and UK, extremely important. But you need to understand, if you cooperate with a criminal state, you will receive crime in your own country. It would be this very important response for what all crime what committed this state. But they tried to make this like a narrow inquest, without even discussion who behind of this crime. just cause of death, nothing else. But I received very strong support from my law team, from my barrister. It was the first coroner who was in our side, and he disagreed with government representative. And then when it was a second coroner, Sir Robert Owen, it was just extraordinary person. And it was first time his words, he said, is it Russia stayed behind of this crime? Straight after that, resistance became even more stronger. We've been refused to use all material. They became a secret files. And everything what might be proved, Russia stayed behind of this crime, it was just not possible. Only way to switch, to go to public inquiry. I know this word now, but then I didn't know even single word like this. I couldn't even explain. Maybe because I didn't know how it's difficult, it was easy for me to do. Because I was motivated, only my love for Sasha and for my feeling, everybody needs to know this truth, only like that. And when I was just saying, you can't do this, I said, okay, what is next? We can go to do this. I said, let's go. But when we apply for public inquiry, we've been refused. Berezovsky, as a Home Secretary, sent a letter to our court and saying, because of that, and that, and particularly it might damage international relationship, you better not to have this. I was so devastated. I couldn't believe why I'm doing this for this country. I'm doing this for these people. I'm not doing this against the UK. I'm even not doing this against Russia. I'm doing this for. I've been just refused. And I said, what can we do? And they say, we can just take this to the court, traditional review. I said, okay. I didn't know what that. I said, just do it. If you can, just do it. But it was a different jurisdiction. What was I did before? It was just for free because it was covered by government. And fortunately, thank you for taxpayers. But to go for this challenge, if I lose, I should pay. And first what we tried to do, to protect my cost. And I lost. It means if I decide to go for this traditional review, if I lose, I should pay to government £60,000. And my lawyer told me, Marina, you do everything. You don't need to blame yourself if you decide not to do this. Just, okay, everybody will understand. You can't put in yours what you have just for this decision. I had 48 hours to decide, but I said to him immediately, do I need to pay as soon as I lost? He said, no. Do I need to pay everything? He said, no. I said, let's go. Just go. Just go. Yes. Of course, I was crying when I received this decision. I said, again, why? It was quite difficult to accept, but we won. And decision of High Court was Berezovsky didn't have no right to refuse this, to give us public inquiry. And what is important to say, it was a not political motivated decision at all. Because it was not Ukraine affair, it was not Crimea, it was not Malaysian going yet. It was a justice. And what I tried to say, how it's important to be in a system when it works. When I say is a strong message to Russian people to understand, if you have this support from legal system, you will have this idea. And then, of course, it was not immediately, but after all this, what I already said in Ukraine happened with Malaysian Boeing when it was shut down, we received decision for our public inquiry. And we started to prepare it. In 2015, we started. And when I was asked by journalists, what do you expect from this public inquiry? I say, I'm already satisfied. I already have this. I already know people will listen this. People will know all this information. And during all these weeks, when I was in the courtroom, my son was with me. And I was thinking how it's important he has his father back. Not in only my words, like your of course, I said only positive things about father, but this was uncritical, and it was his job. He did his something communication. It was so right things, and I saw our son Anatoly like grow up. And if sometimes you receive question, what was most the difficult moment in your life? Yes, of course, decide to go out from Russia. It was the most difficult moment. But another difficult moment was to see Anatoly to make a statement in a courtroom. It was very difficult. But he did, and everybody were very proud. And one thing I will try to say, it's our very special relationship to police. As an officer who was the head of this investigation from very beginning, I met him in hospital, and I just was really immediately relaxed when I saw him. I knew everything now, like in control. But when his two sons were born, not supposed to be born, I mean, because he went to this court to give some statement, his wife was pregnant, and I was very happy for him. And he said, I'm going to have two sons. And of course, I don't need your permission, but may I ask you, my one son will have a second name, Alexander.
Lovely, lovely. Well, thank you very much indeed, Marina. I do apologise. I really meant to allow more time for questions, but I think you'll agree Marina is so eloquent and the story was so riveting that there was no way I was going to stop her from describing her story so vividly. But we do actually have time for a few questions. So if anyone would like to ask Marina a question, gentlemen.
Thank you very much for everything you've said. Could I just take you back to when Perestroika first started? Was the Perestroika welcomed by the people of Russia, or did they find it a frightening experience because they didn't know what was going to happen?
First of all, it was shock therapy. People were not prepared. They do understand something wrong. There's all this lack of information, there's all freedom of speech, and it started to be, and life was terrible. You know, for one example, you can't buy toilet paper. You just don't have it. You have not any hygienical stuff for women at all. If you go to pharmacy, you can't buy a lot of stuff. If you go for shopping, we didn't have its word shopping, but it was empty shelves. And it was terrible. It was obvious something has to be changed. But because all private business was under law, it was illegal. People not allowed. But it was already a lot of people who was able to do this. And when Perestroika started, these people and some law has changed, and people became very creative, and they've been in a right place. But people who never been able to do any things just to work for state, they've been shocked, and particularly people certain age, they've been not young enough to make a change in their life because they've been waiting for pension, so very small but very promising, but life just collapsed. And this, of course, was different. Who accepted, who stayed, blame Gorbachev of everything what happened in their life. It's all about Russia.
Thank you. Just one more question, maybe.
I'm very interested to know whether you fear for your own life as a result of all that's happened to you.
First of all, I never expected my life going to be like that. Again, my parents moved in their life just twice, from one flat to another one. I never moved to this place in Moscow. I prepared to finish my university, then doing my dance career and living in Moscow all my life. But for what happened, just happened. I need to accept it. And
did you fear for your life?
And even fearing of my life, it's just I need to accept. Do you know what I mean? I've never had any frightening after Sasha's death. I would say I would be maybe more worried about Sasha when he was alive. But I think it's just like a natural feeling of woman. You try to protect everybody, but don't think about yourself.
Well, sadly, I think we've come to the end of our hour here together. But If I could just ask Janice, our speaker coordinator, to maybe perhaps give a vote of thanks to Marina. Janice, thank you.
Marina Litvinenko, спасибо большое, очень счастливо.
It's Russia.
Stop showing off now, I'm speaking. It's been a joy and a privilege to welcome you to Plymouth and to hear things from your point of view. You know, we in the West don't have the best relations with Russia, I'm afraid, at the moment. And we never know quite what to believe in the media. You may know the English expression, why let the truth get in the way of a good story? Well, I personally love Russia. I learned Russian in the 60s and started going over there when it was quite a dark and dangerous country, shall I say. And I've been going back several times now. I'm going back in June. I love the people and I love the language. And I'm just sorry that things are the way they are between, the West and Russia. But I would like to, I think we could all join together in wishing you well with your fight for truth and freedom and friendship. And I'd like to thank you very much indeed.
What we love about Russia. It's exactly, we need to love Russia. We just need to remember, unfortunately, we have two Russias now. There's a state Russia and real Russia. And we will love Russia, really. We will, one day, we'll just go to have this back. And I'm absolutely about this. Yeah.